I can't have a favorite pillar. I don't know. I don't. I mean, everyone looks at 18, which is, of course, I was just talking about at great length. I mean, 18 is just an incredible pillar with the animal under the tucked under the arm and the belt and whatnot. But what's important about it in part is that on that belt, um, it may be the word for God or God of gods. That's one potential interpretation I've proposed. And furthermore, on that belt, that may also be symbolism for the sun and what you see during a solar outburst, what's known as electrical plasma discharges that you would see in the sky during a major solar outburst, which I believe that the Göbekli Tepe people saw. So it actually ties in with the concept of God and the sun and God related, and something that is seen in many cultures around the world. Katie and I, my wife Katie, and I, for instance, had the opportunity a few years ago. We spent travel to India, and there they see, for instance, the sun as the living manifestation of the one God. I think we see that at Göbekli Tepe. You see that in Egypt. With the sun. And I think this all makes sense too. If the sun was, and of course it still is important to us, but even more so when you go through periods of an agitated sun, very extreme activity, and then less activity. And there's something else I want to point out here. Göbekli Tepe, let's just think of it about 10,000 BC. The end of the last ice age is 9,700 BC. Göbekli Tepe didn't just pop into appearance, fully sophisticated, all there, and let's say 10,000 BC. I think there had to be time leading up to it. Göbekli Tepe, in terms of geological dating and geological terminology, the major portion of it, or the most sophisticated portion, is at the end of the last ice age. It's at what's known as the Younger Dryas. So a lot of people nowadays like to talk about the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas is the period from approximately 10,900 BCE, or 12,900 years ago, to 9,700 BC or BCE, approximately 11,700 years ago. So that span of time of about 1,200 years. I'm using the geological dating. Some people will give you another numbers, 100 or so years difference. I could tell you why they're wrong, but we won't go into that now because that's not important. What's important is that the end of the last ice age was marked, very interestingly, by this 1,200 year period, which was actually a cold snap, a cold spell globally on Earth, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. But a lot of people have the misconception that, oh, the end of the last ice age, before everything melted, there were glaciers all over the place, etc. No, actually, in places like Egypt and places like the Göbekli Tepe region of Turkey, things were beautiful temperature-wise. There was a lot of foliage. There was a lot of fauna, plant material. It was almost like a paradise. In fact, Göbekli Tepe, some people say, is in the biblical Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Islamic Eden, area of Eden, not necessarily the Garden of Eden, but at least the general area of Eden between the Tigris and Euphrates. So this was a very, very prosperous region with fauna and flora, etc., even at during this cold snap, the Younger Dryas. Now, what is important, and I just want to get this on the record, a lot of people say that there was a comet that hit and caused a cold snap at the Younger Dryas, at the beginning of the Younger Dryas, 10,900 BCE, 12,900 years ago. And some people say, oh, you can see images of the comet at Göbekli Tepe. I say that's absolutely wrong. the evidence is there for something happening at 10,900 BCE at the beginning of the Younger Dryas. It has been misinterpreted as a comet, but in fact, all the evidence is better applicable to a solar outburst. And with recent analysis in just the last few years, what's apparently happened is that there was a solar outburst at about 12,900 years ago, 10,900 BCE. It melted ice dams. It melted ice dams that were backing up huge continental lakes, especially in North America. These ice dams broke. They poured incredible masses of cold water, fresh water into the Atlantic. This changed circulation patterns, and it created this relative cold spell in the Northern Hemisphere in particular. It's actually mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, although it was enough to cause global temperatures to go down all over, but it's primarily a Northern Hemisphere phenomenon. It created essentially a paradise, if you would, in certain regions, like the region of Göbeklitepe and the region of Cairo, where Giza with the pyramids. So it was actually caused by a solar event. And the evidence that's been put forth for a comet actually fits better what we would expect for a solar event, including potentially what have been called little spirals and vitrified rock and that type of thing, which, yes, you can sometimes get those with a comet, but when you don't have impact craters, et cetera, the distribution of them on Earth, I don't want to try to go into great detail here, but as a geologist, it actually is what you get with solar events, these types of vitrified phenomena, wildfires, etc. So there's a lot of evidence out there, and yes, it does support a catastrophic event, but it's solar. Now, this gets back to the Göbekli Tepe people. Why were they so interested in the sun? Why did they equate the sun with God? Why do they have solar plasma? This is very sophisticated. It's not just pictures of sun, but what you would actually see in the sky, configurations you would see in the sky during a solar event. They record that even before the end of the last ice age. And then they were hit by another one in 9700 BC, another solar event, which was probably even more powerful than what began the Younger Dryas, and that just decimated their population. It just changed everything on Earth, caused all these catastrophes, which really, it brought the Göbekli Tepe people and their civilization and other civilizations, for instance, in Egypt, to essentially a standstill. And what we call it now, and I like to give credit to Katie because she came up with this name. We call it the solar induced dark age. So we have a solar induced dark age. It was induced by the sun, by solar activity, and it lasted from approximately 9700 BCE to approximately 3500 BCE. And 3500, the period of 4000 to 3000 BCE, is when we see civilization finally reemerge after 6,000 years of this dark age. So it starts to put everything into the bigger picture. We have Göbekli Tepe. A couple of thousand years later in Turkey, we don't have anything like Göbekli Tepe. What do we have? We have things like Çayhuyuk, mud brick structures, no monumental stone architecture. And we have numerous sites like that now. We have Cappadocia, and they're going underground to protect themselves. So it starts to put it all together, and it's only thousands of years later, after the sun has really calmed down, there's been an extended period of, should we say, good solar weather, and conditions have calmed down, they've been stable, that people were able to re-emerge. And for many people, the easiest thing to think about is Western Europe. You had the fall of the Roman Empire and the Dark Ages until the Renaissance again. Here we have it on a bigger picture. You have the collapse of the civilizations at the end of the last ice age. You have 6,000 years of a dark age, the solar induced dark age. And then eventually 5,000 years or so ago, 5 to 6,000 years ago, from us now, you have the reemergence of civilization. So something that when I was in college and graduate school, I was taught that civilization originated 5 or 6,000 years ago. No, it originated much before that, but it went into a dark age and it was only reinvigorated, re-emerged 5 or 6,000 years ago.